If you happen to be over the age of 25, you might remember a show on Spike TV called 1,000 Ways to Die. Each episode recreated the scariest, most ridiculous, and sometimes bizarre ways people have died. And even though it was macabre, viewers found it entertaining. On that show and in other Worst Ways to Die videos, death by immolation or burning has been described as the most painful way for someone to go. Due to this fact, it's one of the least likely options someone may choose when deciding to end their own life. In September of 2022, a resident of Athens, Georgia named Debbie Collier was reported missing by her family. Only a day later, her charred remains were discovered in a wooded area miles away from her home. At first, investigators were adamant that what happened to Debbie was a personal, targeted attack, but then suddenly changed their minds and claimed that her death was self-inflicted. The details surrounding Debbie Collier's death are some of the most mysterious in recent memory, with many believing that the story just doesn't add up. When you hear the evidence in this case, you too might find yourself asking, why would anyone choose to end their life this way? Could someone else have been involved? And most importantly, what really happened to Debbie Collier? To make sense of these questions, we need to go behind the headlines. "59-year-old Deborah Collier, who went by Debbie, was born on September 2nd, 1963 in Oneonta, Alabama. She and her first husband, Joseph Bearden, moved to Georgia in the early 90s, where they settled to raise their two children, Jeffrey and Amanda. They'd later get divorced, but Debbie remained in Athens, where she worked a long and successful career at Athens First Bank. In 2013, Debbie married her second husband, Steve Collier, blending their family with adult children from previous marriages. She also made a career change, becoming the office manager at a real estate firm called Carriage House Realty. There she made many new friends and was able to spread her positive, uplifting, and infectious personality. She was said to be a person who valued kindness, empathy, and was described as a strong soul who loved to make other people feel special. Debbie was known to consume herself with holidays, enjoyed making art, dancing, listening to music, and having your family together for a home-cooked meal. She was always changing up her look, experimenting with different hairstyles, and prided herself on looking her best in bright, colorful outfits with matching jewelry. Debbie also doted over her step-grandchild, and she just really seemed like an amazing person with a lot of spirit and personality. As most mothers are, Debbie was her daughter Amanda's primary moral support system, as she struggled through several aspects of her life. You see, Amanda had a long-standing on and off-again relationship with a man named Andrew Geigerich. Amanda and Andrew, who is a former amateur MMA fighter, both have had legal troubles stemming from substance abuse and domestic violence in their relationship. Over the years, there were several reports accusing one another of stealing each other's money for drugs, stalking, and physical altercations. While Amanda was living in a second home owned by Steve and Debbie, on at least one occasion, Debbie had to get involved to call the police on Andrew for busting out windows and damaging the property.
I own the property at 1332 Tallahassee Road. Andrew Geigerich is there breaking out the windows in my property, trying to break in on my daughter. I am so sick of him destroying my property. Please arrest him, and if I need to meet you out there, I will.
You sound like breaking out the windows?
Yes, he's out there breaking out the windows. He's broke my daughter's bedroom window right now.
All right, looks like your daughter's also calling in about it.
Okay, good.
All right, well, we got him on the way, okay?
All right, honey. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, bye-bye.
That, along with the physical violence, ultimately led Amanda to get a no-contact order against Andrew, and she decided to move to Maryland to be near where her brother Jeffrey was living. Many people feel like relocating makes it easier to deal with a breakup, so maybe Amanda figured that getting out of Georgia for a while would be a good idea. However, while she was there, it's been said that she and Jeffrey didn't get along very well, and she ultimately decided to move back to Georgia just a few months later. Amanda arrived back to Georgia on September 8th, 2022, and moved back into the second home Steve and Debbie owned. Unfortunately, even though Andrew had a no-contact order, he too moved right back into the home as well. Now, it hasn't been explicitly said, but it's not hard to imagine Debbie being unhappy with Amanda's decision to get back together with Andrew, considering their tumultuous relationship. However, it seems like she was doing the best she could to support her daughter, and on Friday, September 9th, She brought lunch over to the house for Amanda and Andrew. Later on, Debbie and Amanda ran errands and went out to dinner before going their separate ways. When Debbie got back home, she spent some time with Steve and then headed to bed. Now, it's important to note that Debbie and Steve slept in separate bedrooms because Steve was a loud snorer, which made it difficult for Debbie to sleep. Even though the next day was the weekend, Debbie would typically have to be up for work because she normally worked half days on Saturdays and then spent the rest of the day getting her shopping done for the week. However, Debbie had actually taken off that entire week from work, possibly to help get Amanda settled back in from her move, or maybe just because she had vacation time she needed to use. But regardless, she and Steve went to their separate bedrooms as normal at around 9 p.m. The next day, on September 10th, Steve woke up in the morning to get ready for work. That day, he would be working at a lot near Sanford Stadium, parking cars for the University of Georgia football game from 9 to 4. By the time he was walking out the door to leave, Debbie was still in her room asleep, and the rental car she had been driving was still in the driveway. 1 month before, Debbie had been in an accident where a paint can flew off of a work truck in front of her and struck her vehicle. With her car in the shop, she had been using a rental Chrysler Pacifica from Enterprise to get around town. Steve went off to work and planned on seeing her later in the day, but when he got home and the car wasn't there, he figured she went out to do her shopping as usual. Debbie had in fact done shopping that day, but that's a whole ordeal we'll get to in a bit. Earlier that afternoon, Amanda received a notification from Debbie that surprised her. It was a Venmo payment for $2,385 along with the message, "They are not going to let me go. Love you." There is a key to the house and the blue flower pot by the door. The message had came in at 3:17 p.m., but Amanda had said that she was cleaning and setting up the house, so she didn't see the notification until around 45 minutes later. So obviously Amanda was highly confused by this message. She'd later say that she had no idea what her mom was talking about or why she was sending her so much money. She tried to call Debbie to ask her, but the call went straight to voicemail. With no response, Amanda started to get pretty worried and decided to drive over to Debbie and Steve's house to see what was going on. Steve was winding down after getting back from work, but Debbie still wasn't home. Amanda shared the weird message from her mom with Steve and then went to Debbie's room. That's when she found out that her mom's purse and credit card were still in the house. This was highly unusual for Debbie, especially since Steve figured she had gone shopping. She would normally take her credit card and always carried her purse. Steve and Amanda decided to call 911 because Debbie still wasn't answering her phone, and things were starting to seem really suspicious.
Athens, Hurricane 911.
Yes, came home, my wife wasn't home, her driver's license still in there, the rental car's gone, and her daughter's here, and we were kind of worried about what's happening and where she's at. I was wondering if you could send somebody over here.
Okay. Do you have any medical issue? Let's say like Alzheimer's or something like that?
No, she's 59 years old. No, she has no medical issues like that, and according to her daughter who went up and her purse is still here with her driver's license. The only thing is the phone is gone, and she sent her daughter a text about 2 hours ago saying, "They won't let me go." Whatever that means, we don't know. And I've been gone all day parking cars for the football game and all, and that's where we're at.
At around 6:08 p.m., an officer arrived at Debbie and Steve's home off Rocky Drive near the northern city limits of Athens. They recounted information about when they last saw her, the Venmo payment, and the missing Chrysler Pacifica. They said that it was unusual for Debbie to leave without saying anything. They weren't able to provide the year or license plate number of the rental car, but the officer went ahead and logged Debbie and the Georgia Crime Information Center as a missing person. The Athens-Clarke County Police Department immediately began trying to locate Debbie and put out a be on the lookout for her and for the Pacifica. Since her phone was off, they were unable to use her Find My iPhone feature to pinpoint her location. Instead, they decided to contact Sirius XM, who has GPS in the vehicles rented out by Enterprise, in hopes that they'd be able to locate the car and then Debbie. The next day, on September 11th, a representative with Sirius XM contacted Athens police. They said they located the car off Georgia Highway 15 in Clarksville, near the Chattahoochee National Forest, around 60 miles from Debbie's home in Athens. Since Clarksville is a city in Habersham County, the Habersham Sheriff's Office was sent out to respond to the location. When a sergeant near the area arrived, he found the black Pacifica parked in a pull-off to an old logging road. He called on his radio that he had found the vehicle, and another officer responded that he had actually seen it there the night before. However, that was before there was a missing person report, or BOLO, for that car, and the spot is apparently a common place for people to pull off, so he didn't think anything of it. Upon inspecting the Pacifica, he realized that it had been left unlocked, but Debbie was still nowhere to be found. The sergeant on the scene began preparing for a search of the force and requested for canines to be brought in to help. After Athens police learned that the car had been found, for some reason they decided to tell Amanda the approximate location of the latest ping. She soon arrived at the scene and then began screaming, saying, "That's my mom's car." When they were finally able to calm her down and get her away from the search, Amanda spoke to investigators and told them that Debbie suffered from back problems and wouldn't have been able to make it on foot. Ultimately, that would end up being correct, and unfortunately, it was soon discovered that Debbie hadn't made it very far at all. After investigators entered the force with the canines, they noticed a red tote bag laying on its side near an uprooted tree. Inside the bag was a purse and a smashed iPhone. Apparently this was a purse Debbie didn't normally carry, but they were both ultimately identified as belonging to her. There was also what appeared to be the remnants of a fire near the root ball of the tree. One of the officers walked a little further and looked down at an embankment, which is where they made an absolutely horrific discovery. He saw a blue tarp that appeared to be burnt, and a nude female laying on her back, grasping a small tree with her right hand. It was also originally stated that she had burn marks on her abdomen. The officer immediately realized she was dead and identified the body as Debbie Collier. From there, the immediate area was roped off and the Habersham County coroner took Debbie's remains to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's crime lab. A wrecker service came to take the car to the sheriff's office, and they were then faced with a difficult task of notifying Debbie's family. Besides the expected grief and shock, Debbie's family, friends, and even the investigators were all extremely confused about the circumstances. They stated that she had no history of mental health issues, and the only thing she suffered from was chronic pain associated with back problems. Nobody could understand what Debbie was doing so far away from her home and how this could have happened. Almost immediately, everyone suspected foul play, because when you find a woman seemingly burnt to death in the woods after sending an ominous text, what else could it be? Was she kidnapped? Was she meeting someone and something went wrong? Was this a horrible accident? Only time would tell. Treating Debbie's death as a homicide, investigators began trying to put together the pieces by tracing her steps and finding anyone with a potential motive to hurt her. Of course, given the fact that Amanda received that message, along with such a large sum of money, she and Andrew became key persons of interest in the case, especially since Steve had a pretty solid alibi being seen at work that day. Police also spoke to the neighbors of the Colliers, who said that the night before Debbie went missing, they heard a commotion and what sounded like arguing with a younger female. They also said that this wasn't the first time they heard arguing like this, and that somebody, quote, comes up to visit on the weekends and in the evenings, and there's loud screaming and fighting. Even though it didn't take long to locate Debbie, after she was found, it seemed like the investigation began moving much more slowly. The public was receiving little to no information from police, and nearly no statements were being made by her family or friends. However, things changed on September 26th when the infamous surveillance footage of Debbie shopping was released. At the crime scene, investigators gathered various items including the partially burnt blue tarp. On the tarp, they were able to locate a QR code sticker which traced back to a Family Dollar store in Clayton, Georgia. Clayton was 70 miles away from Debbie's home in Athens and about 13 miles north from where the car and her body were found. Debbie shopping at Family Dollar isn't strange in itself and is actually something she did often. However, it is strange when you consider that in Georgia, there's a Dollar General, Family Dollar, or Dollar Tree on every corner, and there was one Debbie frequented less than a mile from her home. Again, what was she doing so far away? In the footage, Debbie could be seen wearing black shoes, shorts, a red Georgia Bulldogs jersey, a red visor, and a crossbody purse. It almost appeared like Debbie was gearing up to watch the football game, but if that were the case, it still wouldn't have made sense for her to leave Athens where people were tailgating. As far as Steve and Amanda knew, she didn't know anyone in Habersham and there was no reason to be there. Debbie's purchases from the store were peculiar as well. They included a red reusable tote bag, a 2-pack of paper towels, a blue tarp, rain poncho, and reusable torch lighter. All of these items were found at the scene and caused even more speculation into what could have taken place. Her son Jeffrey later went on to say that she and Steve had tarps at their house, and Debbie didn't like using plastic. She owned nearly 90 reusable tote bags. Why would she be buying items that she already had at home? This kind of made it seem like the purchases were a spur-of-the-moment decision, But the strangeness didn't stop there. Additional footage was found from outside of the store, and Debbie could be seen arriving in the parking lot at around 2:55 p.m. She appeared to be looking at her phone as she entered the store, possibly looking at a list or text message from someone. She didn't seem to be nervous, fidgety, or suspicious while shopping or checking out, and exiting the store at around 3:09. She sat in her car for about 10 minutes, and during this time was when the Venmo payment and message was sent to Amanda. Many people were wondering if someone else could have signed into her account and then sent the payment from another device, but it was later determined that it came from Debbie's phone while she was sitting in the parking lot. She could then be seen pulling out at 3:19 p.m. Police went on to find additional footage of Debbie, including her going to a Chick-fil-A in Commerce, Georgia at around 1:15. Commerce is around 20 to 23 minutes away from Debbie's home in Athens. So assuming she went straight to Chick-fil-A, she would have had to leave her house sometime around 12:50 to 12:55. A Tallulah Falls school zone camera captured her driving in the Pacifica on Highway 15, headed north toward Rabun County. At 2:17 p.m., she then made her way to the Family Dollar and would have had to backtrack to get back to where her car was found. Even though there was a direct route on the highway, the car wasn't seen on the Tallulah Falls cameras again, which indicates she must have taken back roads to get to the old logging road pull-off. We know the car was seen by that unsuspecting officer at 5 p.m., but what transpired with Debbie in the forest is still unclear. It was also announced that after returning back to the scene, investigators discovered a melted gas can and an unspent bullet on the ground, which may or may not be related to the incident. On September 30th, investigators held a press conference and stated that they believed Debbie's death to be a targeted and deliberate act. They hadn't yet gotten the results of her autopsy, and the only indication of harm to Debbie was the visible burn wounds to her body.
There is no information or evidence to this point that shows that this was something random, that there was something that was out, that was not from somebody that she either knew or somebody who she had some association with. That's what we're seeing at this time. So based on that information, we do not believe that this is a random act of violence. We do not believe that this is the act of a serial killer. We believe that this act was deliberate and personal.
Over the next month, true crime channels, news outlets, and web sleuths were becoming more and more interested in Debbie's baffling death and digging into the past of her family members to try to figure out a potential motive. Her son Jeffrey exposed on social media that the family wasn't being respected or given a chance to grieve and asked that they be given some privacy. He said, "The public has absolutely obliterated any possibility of a normal experience of grief for my family. And for that, I am not sure I will ever be capable of forgiveness. Please put down your bows and arrows and stop hunting my family." Later that same day, he posted on social media concerns regarding the investigators handling his mother's case. "I made the poor decision today to reach out to Habersham County law enforcement. After several attempts and requests to be brought up to date on any information shared regarding my mother's case, I finally found myself on the phone with the Habersham County Sheriff, Joey Terrell, to express my concerns. My goal in the conversation was to request to be updated on any press briefings, releases, or other pertinent information, since my other attempts were not panning out as promised. I was met with a sheriff who did not empathize with my situation, my concerns for my personal and family safety after being doxxed online, or potential leaks coming out of his office, despite several media outlets claiming sources within that department. He instead used his time to snicker and laugh at my attempts to discuss my concerns, and to tell me directly that he wasn't trying to hang up on me when impressing him on his office's actions. Additionally, he claimed that some of the errors regarding poor communication came from short staffing, but he did remind me that the press has the right to free speech. Well, so do I. So I feel compelled to share my experience with the sheriff because I hung up on him abruptly after he continued to snicker, despite my request for him not to laugh at my situation. Unfortunately, the elected sheriff's attitude and lack of understanding does not give me faith or confidence in their ability to handle her deliberate and personal death, nor does his inability to understand my concerns regarding the leaks of information that I only assume is known by those directly working with the investigation. I am no longer feeling emboldened. Now I'm feeling really stuck in a hard place, and I'm asking for the internet's help in this situation to remind me how much people actually care and love for my mother, Debbie. He even set up a petition calling for Sheriff Terrell, who was now being referred to as the Snickering Sheriff, to step down, as it did not appear he was taking Debbie's investigation seriously.
To be honest with you, it emotionally broke me to have a sheriff who's overseeing my mother's homicide investigation laugh.
The sheriff's office sent the following statement, saying in part, quote, "We can assure you that Sheriff Terrell, as well as all involved members of the sheriff's office, have nothing but respect and understanding towards the family, and that any misunderstandings regarding discussions related to this case are nothing more than just that, a misunderstanding."
Well, if it was a misunderstanding, is there a reason why I haven't heard back from them in almost a week now? It's disgusting.
Amanda said that her experience with Debbie's death was extremely difficult, especially after a family member supposedly accused her of being involved. I mentioned before that she and Andrew were persons of interest at first, and Amanda went on to say that even though she went willingly to be interviewed, it turned into a traumatic interrogation. She said an investigator flat out accused her of murdering her mom, so she offered to provide DNA without a lawyer to prove her innocence. However, about 6 weeks after Debbie's death, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation told her that she was no longer considered a suspect in the case. Similarly, Jeffrey said in an interview that he didn't believe his sister had the capacity to hurt their mom, but didn't trust the people she hung out with. After nearly 2 months of investigating Debbie's death as a homicide, police went on to make an extreme pivot in what they believed happened in this case. On November 18th, the Habersham County Sheriff's Office issued a new statement, claiming that they were now ruling her death a suicide. They said, a detailed examination of all gathered information has enabled investigators to determine, based on factual evidence and data, that Mrs. Collier's death was self-inflicted. Furthermore, the GBI Medical Examiner's Office has determined that the cause of death was inhalation of superheated gases, thermal injuries, and hydrocodone intoxication, and that the manner of death was suicide. So that's a lot to unpack, but before we do that, I just want to go through what the autopsy report actually said. Quoting directly from the report, it said, "The body was received clad in a black shoe and a black sock on the left foot. A matching shoe and sock accompanied the body. There were charred remnants of clothing present in the distribution of the lower torso. The clothing was submitted as evidence. The head was in normal shape and the facial bones and mandible were free of palpable fracture. The scalp hair was short, straight, and blonde with brown roots. No injury to the neck, organs, chest, ribs, breast, or sternum. On the lower back was a 3.5 linear scar. All digits were present and fingernails were intact. On the left knee was a 1/2-inch scar. Evidence of injury included thermal injuries, consisting of predominantly 2nd and 3rd degree burns involving approximately 80% of the total body surface area. There was arrhythmia or redness over the frontal scalp, forehead, and left temple with superficial disrupted blisters, consistent with 2nd degree burns. The rest of the face and neck, including the nose, lips, and ears, exhibited patchy charred skin consistent with 3rd degree burns. The neck exhibited blistered skin consistent with 2nd degree burns. Portions of the scalp hair appeared charred. The underlying scalp appeared red consistent with 1st degree burns. Microscopic examination revealed coagulative necrosis, or tissue death, of the tracheal mucosa, or the moist inner lining of the trachea, consistent with thermal injury. The torso exhibited extensive soot deposition with localized areas of redness, blistered skin on the upper chest consistent with 2nd degree burns, and extensive charred leathery skin on the lower chest, abdomen, groin, and external genitalia consistent with 3rd degree burns. Fine soot deposition was on the upper back. Charred leathery skin consistent with 3rd degree burns involved the mid-back and the entire lower back. There was patchy soot deposition over the buttocks. Red blistered skin consistent with 2nd degree burns was visible on the right buttocks. Patchy red blistered skin consistent with 2nd degree burns involved the arms, the right hand, and the right palm, as well as leathery skin consistent with 3rd degree burns on the left palm. Charred leathery skin consistent with 3rd degree burns involved the inner and outer thighs. The right and left feet from the area of the ankles were unaffected. The internal examination of the head, neck, and cardiovascular system were largely unremarkable. As for the respiratory system, the upper airway was clear of soot, debris, and foreign material. The lungs had organic material present that is consistent with terminal aspiration. This occurs when a person inhales a foreign substance into the lungs just before death. There was mention of rare giant cells, which may indicate an inflammatory response. There was also vascular congestion, which refers to an accumulation of blood in the lung vessels, potentially due to impaired circulation. The trachea and epiglottis had areas where the epithelium, or protective layer of cells, were missing due to coagulative necrosis, or cell death caused by heat or thermal injury. There was also mild swelling present in the trachea. A separate toxicology report indicated that Debbie had high levels of opioid hydrocodone in her system. The opinion of the examiner stated, quote, Debbie was found deceased with thermal injuries and nearby burn site remains, including a melted gas can. Autopsy examination revealed thermal injuries of the external body surface and of the trachea mucosa, or windpipe. No deposited soot in the airway and no significant elevation of blood carboxyhemoglobin. These findings may be due to a sudden intense flash fire as well as the outdoor environment of the fire. No other significant injuries were noted. Postmortem toxicology testing was positive for the above listed substance, as well as therapeutic drugs, and negative for alcohol. Investigation by law enforcement revealed circumstances consistent with a self-intentioned act, and that she was alone at the time of the incident. Therefore, based on information available at this time, the manner of death is certified as suicide. The cause of death is inhalation of superheated gases, thermal injuries, and hydrocodone intoxication. Considering the fact that police had been so adamant that Debbie's death was a targeted and personal homicide, it was really hard for many people to accept that she could have done this herself. However, how did the police know that she was alone? And what did she mean when she messaged, "They aren't going to let me go"? Was the "they" she was referring to indicative of a mental health episode, or were the police just giving up by ruling it a suicide? There's a lot more inconsistencies, strange details, questions, and theories that we'll go over, and it's important to note that not everyone in Debbie's family accepts these new revelations. After Debbie's death was ruled a suicide, Amanda came out in an interview on a podcast hosted by her cousin, stating that in hindsight, she can see signs that her mother might have been preparing to take her own life. She said that even though Debbie was generally a really happy person, the day before she disappeared, she apparently seemed really sad. Why she didn't mention that to the police is anyone's guess, but she also said that her mom was giving away a bunch of items. Even though this is consistent in people who are planning to take their own life, it's also important to remember that Amanda had just moved back to Georgia. If these items were things like home decorations, kitchen supplies, or photos, what have you, this could have just been Debbie trying to help her daughter get settled in the house. If it were things like family heirlooms or sentimental items, that would be an entirely different story, but Amanda never specified what these items were. Also, there have been several discrepancies during Amanda's interviews with the news and her cousin, the main one being what she did after she received the strange text from her mom.
I started going to all the different places that I thought she would go, like Walmart, Ulta. I mean, I drove around for at least 2 hours.
Okay, so the phone call to 911 was made first, and then because there's some reports that you went to look for her at Ulta and Walmart. So for what I'm hearing, you're saying that you tried to get hold of Steve, you went to your mom's house, and then you called 911. So you weren't out searching for her for hours before you made the call?
No.
It's a little weird that she would make up driving around for hours looking for her mom and then just pretend she didn't say that later on. Another discrepancy was that Amanda claimed she hadn't spoken to Debbie since when she saw her at dinner the night before on the 10th. However, police said that there was evidence of a phone call between them on the 11th. Maybe in the stress of everything, Amanda just forgot about the phone call, but it would be interesting to know what they talked about. In that same realm, it would be interesting to know who else, if anyone, Debbie talked to that day. It's never been released whether she had plans to meet up with friends for a tailgate or watch the game somewhere or anything. Jeffrey has come out publicly to say that he's skeptical that the person in the footage at the Family Dollar is even his mom because she hadn't worn shorts in over 5 years.
I've never seen my mom wear shorts in the last 5 years of her life.
So you're questioning if that was even your mom in that video?
Absolutely. Yeah. I am.
Sleuths online have put together photos of Amanda with her posture and body type against the photos from the Family Dollar footage. They speculate that it could be her disguising herself as Debbie in order to stage a kidnapping. But for what reason? One creator pointed out that women are creatures of habit and often wear their purses the same way. Debbie seemed like the kind of person who wore her purse straps on one shoulder, whereas Amanda wore hers crossbody, similar to in the footage. They pointed out that the person in the footage seems to have a little larger build than Debbie, and that even though the hair is blonde, it's not styled in the way Debbie normally styles it, and resembles a wig. Debbie was clearly someone who valued her appearance, and people have said that the woman in the footage looks frumpy, and that the visor was worn perhaps to hide the person's face.
Now, I noticed going through these videos that the person at Family Dollar has the same color shorts on that Amanda has on in this picture. And they're just as short as the one in that picture too. Now let's talk about how short these shorts are. Here is what Debbie's son had said about the shorts.
I've never seen my mom wear shorts in the last 5 years of her life.
Debbie being 59, I don't think is gonna wear short shorts like that. The person in this Family Dollar picture looks a lot bigger and a lot younger than Debbie Collier. I really think that Debbie Collier is got a smaller build than what's in this picture. Now let's talk about this hair. That looks like a wig. If you see the line going over and going down, that is called a wig. And I doubt out of all the things, Debbie's not going to walk out with bedhead. And when you dye your hair and stuff, it's not going to turn out like that. See? Now tell me if that matches the Family Dollar pictures. See, here's a comparison from Debbie's hair to that person from Family Dollar. It's more curlier. It's more ratted. She's got her straight. Now, we all have a creature of habit. Women wear their purses the same. Debbie wears hers on her shoulder. Amanda wears hers over her head. So let's go back to the Family Dollar picture.
Some people speculate that Amanda got into an argument with her mom over money, as indicated by neighbors who reported a disturbance at the home, and then staged a kidnapping so that she could Venmo herself money from her mom's phone. It's also strange that Debbie was seen in Commerce, which also happens to be where Andrew was living with his family prior to Amanda returning home. Now, we already know that Andrew has a pretty sketchy criminal background, but members of his family do as well. In fact, in 2021, his mother was sentenced to 30 years in prison for trafficking meth after being caught in a sting operation selling to an undercover officer. There were also reports that the amount of money Andrew owed in the court fees was suspiciously similar to the amount of money Debbie sent to Amanda. In addition, the area where she was located also happens to be near a place called Victory Home Rehab Center. This is a faith-based drug rehab for men, and it's been speculated that perhaps Debbie was trying to get someone in her life into the rehab center. Coincidentally, the amount of money she sent is equal to the cost for 5 months of treatment at the facility. So perhaps she was trying to help pay for Andrew to get into rehab. Could Andrew have been in the car with Debbie, who was planning on dropping him off there, but then told Amanda that the people at the facility weren't going to let her go inside to enroll him? Then maybe Andrew changed his mind and wanted the money instead, so he ordered her inside the Family Dollar to essentially purchase her own kill kit. And again, these are just theories that people have bounced around online. I want to share as many with you as I can so that you can form your own opinion. But it's important to remember that the police don't believe Amanda or Andrew to be involved. Another interesting detail is that during the investigation, Debbie's sister called to report a tip about the man she had gotten into the paint can accident with. According to her, Amanda said that the man begged Debbie not to call the police because he was on parole and not supposed to be driving. Debbie ended up calling the police anyway, and her sister thought that maybe the man was a criminal with a vendetta toward her for getting him in trouble while on parole.
From my niece, she said that she was in an accident about a month ago, and she was, on the road. She was following this truck, and this truck lost a paint can, and the paint can hit my sister's car, and the paint went everywhere. And the driver was trying to convince my sister not to tell the cops that he was driving because he was out on parole, and there was, a stipulation to his parole that he couldn't drive.
I guess you think I'm sorry. I was going to ask, do you think that was told to anybody else? Do you think that was told to the officer, that concern?
That's standing from my niece.
However, this was later debunked when the man in question came forward. He said that he was in fact not on parole and never even claimed to be. So why would Amanda tell her aunt this? No one's really sure. Even though Jeffrey doesn't believe that his mother caused her own death, there is one more detail that could help strengthen that possibility. Many people have wondered if Debbie was going to take her own life. Would she only message Amanda and not Steve and Jeffrey, who she was just as close to. Well, after analyzing Debbie's phone history, investigators found that around the same time she sent that Venmo message, she also attempted to send Jeffrey a text. The text said, "I love you," but it unfortunately did not go through. It's been insinuated by Amanda that Jeffrey and Debbie were in the middle of a feud, and he had blocked his mom's number, making it so the text couldn't go through. Even though Jeffrey and his mom were close, some people think he could have been upset with her for giving Amanda so many chances with her drug use, loaning money, and issues with Andrew. Other people think that perhaps Debbie shut her phone off right after she sent the text, not giving it enough time to go through. Regardless, it's really tragic. Jeffrey didn't receive the last text from his mom and didn't have the opportunity to respond. Maybe this text really did indicate she was getting ready to end her life, but it could also have been sent if she knew she was in trouble with a capture and was likely not going to make it out alive. There are countless other theories online of what could have taken place, but the final one I want to focus on is the fact that Debbie had hydrocodone in her system. Now, this was a medication prescribed to Debbie in pain management for her back problems, but some reports indicate that the amount in her system was far beyond the therapeutic dose. However, other experts say that it would be impossible to tell how high of a tolerance Debbie had developed over the years of using the medication, and the amount in her system wouldn't necessarily be lethal to everyone. That being said, it would be interesting to know if the amount in her system was consistent with the amount prescribed to her. This could indicate several things. First, if she was overusing the medication, she may have run out of her pills early. Opioid pain medication is extremely regimented in Georgia, and if you run out early, doctors legally aren't allowed to prescribe you anymore. Maybe if she had run out early by taking more than her prescribed dose, she decided to meet up with someone to buy more and something went wrong, like a drug deal gone bad situation. The second factor is the headspace that someone dealing with chronic pain can fall into. People who live with chronic pain, especially when it's not being properly managed with medication, can become depressed, overwhelmed, and sometimes even suicidal. Having a condition where you're in constant pain that can't be treated has to be like living a perpetual state of hell. But due to the opioid epidemic in our country, it's becoming harder and harder for people in pain to get opioids that can help them. This can cause people to feel like there's no way out of their own bodies, and that ending their lives is the only option for peace. I truly can't imagine what that's like, and no one may know whether or not Debbie was dealing with something like this. However, we see all the time in the media celebrities like comedians, musicians, people with seemingly perfect lives who spread happiness to other people are often the ones suffering the most internally and turn to suicide. That being said, if Debbie did take her own life, self-immolation or burning to death has to be one of the most bizarre and terrifying ways to do it, especially when you consider that Debbie supposedly had hydrocodone at her disposal. Many people have pointed out that it would have made more sense for her to just overdose, but again, this would depend on how many pills she had left and her tolerance. There's also people who think that maybe she did actually try to overdose and the burning was just an accident. They say she could have gone into the woods and lit a fire to keep warm, although I'm not sure how chilly it would have been in September, and then fell into it after taking too many pills. This would also kind of explain why Debbie decided to go so far away from home. It's a documented phenomenon for people who want to take their own lives to go in an isolated area where they won't be easily discovered by their families, hoping to save them from trauma. All of that could theoretically make sense, but there are some parts of the autopsy that a famous pathologist says prove otherwise. Months after the autopsy report came out about Debbie's death being ruled a suicide, a former New York City chief medical examiner, Dr. Michael Baden, came forward with his opinion. Dr. Baden is a famous pathologist who was the host of the HBO series Autopsy for 13 years and worked as an expert for cases like George Floyd and Jeffrey Epstein. In his opinion, he thinks that all of the evidence related to Debbie's death points to a homicide. He stated that the autopsy found no traces of soot or carbon monoxide in her airway or lungs, which means she was dead prior to her body being exposed to the fire. According to him, this type of evidence is present 99% of the time when people die in a fire, especially self-immolation. He added that it would have had to have been extremely windy for all carbon monoxide to blow away, which is unlikely considering the densely forested area where Debbie was found. He believes that the report that said investigation by law enforcement revealed circumstances consistent with a self-intentioned act translates to, the police told me it was a suicide, and even fired shots by saying, I think the medical examiner doesn't understand what forensic pathology is. Like I mentioned before, there are just so many bizarre details about this case, making it really hard to bring them all together in any sort of succinct way. So I'll also just mention that people have raised questions over the amount of time it took for Amanda and Steve to report Debbie missing. Even though Steve had the alibi of parking cars at the UGA game, he was said to have gotten off work at about 4, but then didn't call 911 with Amanda until just about 6. Amanda had seen the message from her mom just after 4, so why did it take so long to call, especially since she didn't actually go driving around looking for her like she originally claimed? Even though Amanda reported that Debbie left behind her credit card, it appeared from the Family Dollar footage that she pulled out some other form of payment from her pocket. I haven't been able to find whether or not she used another credit or debit card or cash. If she used a different card attached to her and Steve's account, wouldn't he have easily been able to see recent transactions? That probably would have been a lot quicker than investigators using the QR code on the tarp to trace it back to the store. Regardless of all the weirdness surrounding this case, there seems to be just as many people who think it was just a suicide as there are who think it was a murder. Some people think that the bullet found on the ground at the scene indicates that Debbie was forced into the forest at gunpoint. However, a few experts pointed out that the bullet tip appears to be oxidized and covered in old foliage. It's likely that it had been there for a very long time, especially since finding bullets in the woods isn't too uncommon in Georgia. However, what is uncommon is self-immolation, and that's just one thing I, as well as thousands of other people following this case, just can't get past. Why would anyone choose the most painful way to go is beyond me, and honestly, just doesn't make any sense. Granted, if someone is going through a mental health episode, a lot of things they do don't make sense. Unfortunately, the circumstances surrounding Debbie Collier's untimely death will probably continue to remain a mystery. Given the fact that the police have closed the case, it's likely that people close to Debbie, as well as true crime enthusiasts, will be the only ones still searching for answers. That being said, even though there is still speculation, I think it's important for us to allow Debbie's family to mourn her death in peace. At the end of the day, no one can say for sure what happened or why, so harassing potentially innocent grieving family members isn't the way to go. I would encourage anyone interested in this case to discuss it amongst themselves in the comments here or on other channels covering this case, rather than directing any hate and suspicion towards Debbie's loved ones. Debbie Collier was an amazing wife, mother, grandmother, sister, and friend whose life was cut far too short. I hope that one day more information will come out that can either get Debbie justice or put this tragic mystery to rest. This has been Joshua John with Behind the Headlines, and until next time, stay safe.